Thank you, Deb. It's a real joy to be with you, and good evening, everyone. I'm very excited about tonight that we're honoring the memory and the legacy of Sister Thea Bowman during Black History Month, and really recalling the gift that she was to the church, to the world, the gift and the spirit of Black Catholics to the church and to the world. So I did see many people on here that I know. I saw Sister Rosetta Brown, who is also a member of the National Black Sisters Conference. I don't know how many others may be on here, but I did see Sister Rosetta, who certainly knew Sister Thea well, as many of you did. I think Thea touched so many lives, and just about everyone would have a story of encountering her. And the one gift that Thea had, I think when she met you, she made you feel like you were the only person in the world. You were the most important person at that moment. And she just embraced you with love and joy. And I think this really came from Sister Thea's background. As you'll see in the film, she was the only child of her parents. And they were older when Sister Thea was born in Canton, Mississippi, where she grew up. She spent most of her young life sitting at the feet of the elders. And so Thea came to embody that wisdom and that spirit of the old folks, listening to the stories and learning early on the history of being Black in America, the struggle and the joys, and the role that faith played right at the very center of people's lives in the midst of so much hardship. So Sister Thea came to know and love the Lord very early in her life, having been raised in her early years as a Baptist. And she came to love the preaching and the singing and the storytelling. And she embodied that. And as she converted and became Catholic when the Franciscan sisters came to Canton and opened Holy Child Jesus School, and Sister Thea asked to go in the 6th grade. She immediately loved the sisters. She loved that they cared about the people and they came to serve and to teach. And so the children had a sense of worth, and this was in the segregated South at a time when schools were not integrated and education was difficult to come by. And so Thea and her family really appreciated the gifts that the sisters brought. And so early on, I think Thea knew that she wanted to be one of them. She wanted to be like them. She wanted to serve her people, and she was filled with that kind of love. And she embodied that throughout her life. I could tell many wonderful stories of Thea. I was blessed to meet her when I joined the National Black Sisters Conference. And as she traveled around the country, as many of you know, preaching and teaching, and she often came to Chicago. And she preached several times at my home parish of St. Sabina's. And I was very blessed that a couple of times she even stayed with my mother and myself at our home. And so we would sit up late at night and laugh and talk, and Thea would break out in song. And so I knew her as a very human person. I never thought of her as a saint, but I certainly thought of her as someone that was truly in love with the Lord. And she loved people. I never heard Sister Thea say anything bad about someone. She always tried to find the good and to bring that out. And so it was always a joy to be in her presence. And she loved her people. I cannot emphasize that enough. She loved being Black. She loved being Catholic. And so if you were blessed enough to be one of her students at Xavier University, as she preached, her teaching was through her preaching and through her music and her love of God, and people left there changed. So when you met Thea, you were going to be changed. And you knew that she was a woman that walked with God and trusted God. And while that might be easy to do, when one is well and healthy and young and full of life and vitality. It is at the moments when one is vulnerable and one is sick that you really see faith. And we saw that in Thea. Thea embraced her sickness as she embraced life. She put her arms around it. She not that she wanted to be sick, but she accepted it as part of who she was, and she lived with it. Thea never gave up on life, and that's why she said she was going to live until she went home as a shooting star. She never saw death as her enemy, but she saw life being transformed from this life to the next life. And I think that really came through her understanding of faith as a Black woman, and understanding the struggles of her people, and never giving up, knowing that even when the church failed to love her, to love her Blackness, to love her people, Thea never stopped loving the church. In fact, I think she loved it more. You will see that as she speaks before the bishops' conference, and she calls them to really embrace the gifts of Black Catholics, not to be afraid, not to shun those gifts, but to embrace them because it's part of the church and it makes the church fully Catholic. And so Thea believed that without the gifts of African American Catholics, the church could not truly be universal. And so that was her mission. Her mission was to share that good news, to challenge all of us, to embrace everyone, to find a place at the table for all of God's people. And Thea did that without being threatening, without turning people off, but loving them, even in their shortcomings, in their failure perhaps to embrace their brothers and sisters. She showed all of us how to do that, how to love as Christ loved. And so I really feel blessed to have known her. I often think one time, shortly before she died, it was about a year before she died, it was Thanksgiving, and she was here at Chicago preaching at Holy Name Cathedral. And she asked my mother if she would come down to Canton and prepare Thanksgiving dinner. And so after the revival, my mother says, "Come here." She says, "Sister Thea wants me to come to Canton and prepare Thanksgiving dinner." And I looked at my mother and I said, "And do what?" She said, "We're going to go to Mississippi and spend Thanksgiving with Sister Thea." And so we cooked the food, we froze it, we got in the car, we drove to Canton, and Thea was quite sick. And I remember we walked in, Dora let us in, and we were putting the food away. And Thea came out of her bedroom and she started looking through, and she spied the corn muffins, and her eyes got really big. And I said to her, I said, "Thea," I said, "I counted these corn muffins. I said, I know exactly how many I have here, and I better have that same number tomorrow for Thanksgiving." And she just kind of looked at me. And so we left and went to the hotel. And the next morning we came back, and Doris said, "Ask Thea about the corn muffins." And Thea came out. I said, "Thea, I think some of my corn muffins are missing." She said, "Really?" She said, "I wonder what happened to them." And we laughed, and it was the best Thanksgiving. We sat around her bed. She told stories, we sang songs, and we celebrated life. And I will always remember that about Thea. So I feel very blessed to have known her, to have sat at her feet, to have learned from this old folks child, to be in the presence of this saintly woman. And I already know that she is a saint, singing in the heavenly choir and even directing it at times. But now I think we have to challenge our church to move forward the process, not just for Thea, but for the 5 other men and women, African Americans, who are on the road toward official sainthood. It's long overdue for African American Catholics who have been most faithful to this church to be represented in that litany of the saints. As Thea said, we bring our gifts, we bring all that we have to the church, and we simply want to have a place at the table. So as we watch this film, Let us celebrate Sister Thea's life, but more important, let us be the Theas of our time. Let us proclaim the good news. Let us embrace one another in love. Let us challenge our church to be all that Christ intends for it to be. And most of all, let us, like Thea, love until we go home like a shooting star. Thank you.